and welcome to Conservative Talk.
We got a pretty big show this week.
We absolutely do.
For starters, the IRS says that they're about to hire 87,000 new revenue men.
Yes, and this week must be opposite week because we have things like this going on, while at the same time, this going on.
It definitely has to be opposite week because for the first time ever, they're talking about C's not only getting degrees, but they can also get you a scholarship.
Absolutely, and to throw things even into greater perspective, Fauci actually admits that he created COVID.
What a weird week, man, because, speaking of conspiracies, right? Buck's been telling us in the conspiracy corner that the IRS is actually arming up to go to war with the American taxpayer.
I think you're right. This is going to be a big episode.
Yep.
Well, hello, T-R-O-U-B-L-E. I said, hey. 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 Well, I smell T-R-O-U-B-L-E.
And welcome back to Conservatives Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And Jamie's preferred pronouns are America and first.
You daggum right. Look, I thought he was going somewhere else with that. That was a shock to me. You're right. You're absolutely right. I thought woo. Heck yeah, boy. Those are my pronouns.
Oh, man. So at the beginning of each episode, we always like to remind everybody that make sure that you like and share any of our content that you run across on any of our platforms that we release any of our productions out on. Make sure you by hitting the like button and commenting on any of our productions. It really helps us get higher into the news feed and really helps us to get our show out in front of a lot more people than what we would just be able to do organically. Make sure you also subscribe to any of our shows that you see on any of these platforms, just so where you can make sure that you are up to date on everything that we have coming out and coming forward. And speaking of that, make sure that you go to our website that's on the screen right there in front of you, conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner and help us out with what you're able to, because every little bit goes an extremely long way into allowing Jamie and I to be able to continue to make these productions and to grow and really make better and better things. And while you're there, make sure that you go onto our homepage and fill out your email address on there. Again, we're getting ready to start working on our bi-weekly newsletter that we're going to be sending out. And the first one that we're going to send out, I'm already telling you right now, is it's going to have the kind of the teasers or the sneak peek of the massive this massive project that Jamie and I have been working on for the past month and a half, roughly. Yeah. It's
not a pandemic special, but it's a special.
It's going to be special. That's very sure. It's definitely going to be sure. It'd be special, but it's so by signing up for that, that's the way that you're going to be able to get kind of the insider scoop, or at least kind of get a notion of what it is that we're working on this. And this project has caused a lot of very long nights, believe me, already, and we've just started getting our feet wet on this. But it's also going to be something that is going to keep you in the loop with some of the other organizations and efforts that we have moving forward as well. So, Jamie, how about let's go ahead and jump right into your favorite part. Let's do it.
87 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
What?
Can't wait. Super exciting.
Again, I'm liking more and more the idea that we do the whole little the pick a date raffle type of deal, the whole pick a date 50-50 raffle. I'm liking that.
Yeah, I think that's what we go with. Subscribe to maybe we can do that as part of our newsletter. We'll talk about that more.
Exactly. If that's something that you'd be interested in, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, and that's something that we can send more information out about and make sure that you're kept in the loop with everything on that. So let's jump right into let's jump right into the first topic real fast. So the so Congress right now, and the House has actually been recalled back into session this week to where they're voting on this huge, or I say huge, it's actually a scaled down version of the Build Back Broke plan that Biden has been pushing throughout his entire administration so far. But it is scaled back from what it originally was. It went from almost 4 trillion down to less than 1 trillion essentially. But it's
What a fumble.
yeah, for real. But at the same time, wow. I mean,
That's kind of my thing, right? So we went from Build Back Better to the what was it, Inflation Reduction Act,
mhm.
and then now it's had to change title again.
Yeah, so the new official title, because of some parliamentary procedures that Senator Graham had raised, is now it is now known as an act to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of the Senate Congressional Resolution 14.
Yeah, what he said.
That's the new title. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily.
And here's the kind of thing for me that really is kind of grinding my gears, right?
Mhm.
In a time to where we have so many different things going on in the United States. We're fighting homelessness. We're fighting trying to do better. School security has been another big issue.
Yes.
We have now put in the budget to hire 87 new IRS agents.
Yes.
What was that movie? I think everybody was it Lawless?
Lawless. Yes.
When they came in and just started trying to take everyone's assets in order to build a railroad.
Well, no, not entirely. I mean, so what that had revolved around was essentially during Prohibition.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
it was still
where
about the moonshine. Now I'm remembering. It's been a
he's-
long time since I've seen that movie.
Yeah, Special Agent Rake there on the screen was essentially he was a Revenooer man. He was part of the the Bureau of what was it? The Bureau of Prohibition, which was a subsection of the Treasury, which was it was a subsection of the Department of Internal Revenue, which was a subsection of the Department of Treasury. So it was a precursor of the IRS, Department of Internal Revenue.
Yeah, the movie coming back to me, I had to pull the file because I remember when guy ran out of gas, and so he poured some of the shine in his tank to restart the car.
But yeah, so essentially, the new Revenooer or the new Revenooer man is not going to be chasing down your quote unquote yokel hillbillies up in the Appalachian Mountains. They're going to be chasing down the average everyday American that has a stock trading app on their phone.
Yep.
Specifically in relation to if they have bought into any sort of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, cryptocurrencies or anybody who's gotten the what is it, like Acorns or anything like that, or Public or any of those things, to where you're purchasing fractions of shares or buying shares online, or cryptocurrencies, altcoins, things of that nature. But here's my thing, right? We've gone through so many iterations of this, of the United States trying to figure out how to tax cryptocurrency. Yet there are people who have been trying to have this conversation, and honestly, there's some congressional members who are on the finance committee who have noted, there's a better way of doing this than what they're trying to do.
Well, there's a better way of doing anything than what the government tries to do.
Always. But to me, this is going to be a very interesting conversation, because we're talking about people who have no idea how the technology works, who are trying to tax it, which means that it won't make any sense. So probably you'll see I don't want to scare anybody, but a downturn in the market, even more downturn than we're already seeing. And then basically the government's going to come in and take the technology and then sell it back to us.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to note that the original title of this, the Inflation Reduction Act, it was put out there specifically to give Americans, and specifically Joe Manchin, encouragement, saying that, hey, this is actually going to help bring down inflation that is running rampant across America simply because of Joe Biden and his reckless energy policies. But as we've seen by some estimates that are coming out and being reported by a multitude of news outlets, I mean, it may reduce inflation over 10 years at a percentage of 0.3%,
Yeah.
possibly, but you won't actually see that 0.3% until year 10 of this.
Yeah, you can go to C-SPAN and rewatch the tape when they start talking about the numbers and the hearings that where they show where it goes back to 10 years or it goes to 10 years in order to hit what was something like 300 billion
Mm-hmm.
in reduction. I can't remember if I watched that tape a couple of nights ago. It was this past week. But the hard part for me is when you have, and I said this last week, when you have $28 trillion in deficit debt, 300 billion is just like a penny drop in the bucket, and that still is not going to affect inflation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's incredible to think that they are so disconnected with Americans and what we are feeling at the ground roots or the grassroots everyday American. We go to the grocery stores ourselves to buy our food as opposed to having our servants leave the manor
so
and go
clueless.
up there.
There's a meme that I found
Yeah.
that
Gonna
really
throw that
kind
one
of
up real there.
explains, like, I mean, that kind of explains the situation for a host of millennials as well as a few other people.
Mhm.
You finally get in there. You're like, you
I made it.
finally made it out. We've made it
Mhm.
out. We're going to the middle class, and then it's all of a sudden inflation comes in and says, no, you're going to be poor still. Because it's the same people who they're like, oh, we don't feel it affected, or the same people from these areas that almost immediately bounce back out after the Great Recession, and we get in the same cycle again. So now
Mhm.
we're getting ready to start another recession, and for the majority of us, we're in a recession. Even if the White House doesn't want to say that we are, we're in a recession.
Yeah, they don't like saying the R
I don't
word.
want to say the R word. But the impact is now going to be stretched across another generation
Yes.
of Americans.
Yeah, so not just generations, but across the board in every sort of demographic, any sort of, be it age, race, creed, color. I
Yeah.
mean, it's going to be worldwide essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, America being the premier economic generator for the entire world. If we're facing economic woes, the entire world's facing economic woes.
And we're really seeing how the tethering is affecting each other, right? So for the first time ever, the pound and the euro are right there at the equivalent to the dollar. That never happened before.
Yes, that was interesting.
One thing that I watched on Vice, the Vice channel or whatever, they were doing a special on China and the developments that are going on over there, because in China's a little bit different. And when it comes to the development world than we have here, like a lot of times what you'll do is, especially if you get a new home, you're under construction loan where, you really don't start paying the mortgage or anything until after it's built and you complete it. You just may pay like a certain percentage or something of that nature. And then you'll go to your full mortgage rate. Whereas over there, these people are like paying, what the payment is, and the buildings aren't built yet. And then you're starting to see like 2-year delays on some of these condos. And people were just like, I'm not paying anymore.
Yeah.
Come hell or high water, I'm just not going to pay it.
Well,
and so when you start looking at all that tension, you got Europe under tension because their money is not as valuable. Plus, you got everyone trying to join NATO over there. That really is just going to lead to a war with Russia. And on the other side, you have Taiwan and what we talked about with Pelosi going at it with China, and the Chinese government is feeling the pressure to actually do it now because there was a red line.
Well,
and then
honesty,
they're economically not going to be able to establish.
They're bringing in these Revenooer men
because they want exactly.
That's the reason why America's bringing in these Revenooer men, is because they are pushing all of these socialist and communist agendas and these communist ideals. And in order for them to be able to fund these things, they have to essentially put the boot on the neck of every American and force you to pay all of these taxes, and robbing every American of their hard-earned assets. And it's not just that they're forcing this, or it's not just the fact that they're putting out these policies and they have these egregious tax increases, but now they're bringing in 87, or they could potentially be bringing in 87,000 additional new IRS agents. These agents are not going to be going in and sitting on a telephone and saying, "Hey, this is the IRS. How can I direct your call?"
It's investigative units. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they are there to come after anybody that is making less than $200,000 a year.
Yep. And make sure that every portion is paid, which is, it goes completely against everything that the administration said and ran on, you know, in 2019 through 2020.
Absolutely. So these are a couple of things that this thing is actually going to raise some of the taxes on, and that, so it's going to increase the corporate tax minimum to 15%. It's going to create a new 1% excise tax on corporate stock buybacks. So that's essentially where if a company goes public and then they want to recoup some of the money that they had, or recoup some of the control that they had released,
liability out there.
they buy some of this control back,
which is good for shareholders. A lot of people don't think buybacks are good for shareholders, and I'm not going to go on a rabbit hole on this, but what you're really doing is you're taking, it's just like when we put bonds out there, you're taking some of that back, right? So you're reducing the number of shares that are out there, which is only going to increase current shareholders' profits.
Well, if the demand for that,
share is still there, you know, and as long as the, you know, PEs are right and everything else. But I'm not going to go on a tangent on that. This whole thing upsets me. And also,
it can be used as a means to essentially hide just how poorly a company is doing.
That's debatable, and I really don't want to get in that portion of this episode. That's going to be a whole nother segment, because I will say this though, because I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Otherwise, I'll be there forever. The key for me that I'm having a hard time with too is what a lot of people don't realize is that when the corporate bond rate increases, so does municipal bonds. So when it's only hurting themselves, like you know what I mean? Like local governments are going to feel this. State governments are going to feel this. Anything that, you know, treasury notes are going to feel. Everybody's going to feel this, and they're just.
No, you're right. So another thing that does is it has a tax increase on the crude oil that's being brought in, but it also establishes a new tax, which is something I found interesting. We had heard that it was going to happen before in the past. We had seen that this was something that they were pushing for. Quite frankly, this is AOC's baby, and that is this. They are essentially establishing a carbon tax, or a methane carbon emissions tax.
Wow.
So you will have to pay. So if an industry, for instance, we'll use some local industries here in Northwest Georgia. If you're producing, say, for instance, steel, and you are using a furnace to heat everything up to where you're able to form the steel products in order to be able to sell them. Well, some of that's going into that is carbon. You're using these coal furnaces. You're using a lot of the energy there that is being released as carbon emissions and methane emissions and things of that nature. And that's actually going to increase your tax rate. Think about it this way. So it's actually also a tax on, we'll call them what they are, cow farts.
Yeah.
So every farmer is going to be receiving a tax increase.
So basically what they've done is, so if you live in the metro area already, right, then I don't live in the metro area, so I have no idea about how it actually works, but there is a fee that's associated with it, and you have to get your emissions checked, and you have to pass your emissions around the time that you get your tag, everything else, in order for you to.
Depends on the county, yes.
Yeah, but it's primarily in the metro area. or right there at the cups of the metro line in the state of Georgia, and other large populated states have been doing the same thing. Pretty much what this does is it takes it to rural America, where we've never had any admission issues because you don't have such a high
except for the cow
concentration.
parts.
Well, what I mean is like you don't have
a
it.
vehicle.
You don't have a
admission, yeah.
vehicle admissions like regulations,
Mhm.
you know, and so now they essentially have taken a blanket overlay and taken it national to where it's not just a sustainability measure for high dense areas.
No, you're right about that. It's
Garbage. That's what it is.
well, fair enough. We'll call it what it is. But the fact that these new IRS agents are going to be coming in and are going to be essentially going after everyday Americans, there is the association of the claim that this massive influx, which is essentially, well, I believe the figure that I saw was almost 92% of what the current IRS employment agency is total, would be replacing the 50,000 outgoing IRS agents who are or who are seen as would potentially be retiring over the next 5 years. How can you have a federal agency whose essentially more than half of the entire agency is going to be retiring within the next 5 years?
Oh, I can tell you exactly how, because who wants to work for the IRS? Like the people. Like, here's the thing, right? And this is purely just
Well, with the job
speculation and
postings
opinion.
that they've had,
Like just pure speculation and opinion, right? Like I believe that there was a time where you could go work for the IRS and it wasn't a bad gig. It was probably a decent thing to do to where you weren't so stressed out and, you know, or whatever, and you just backed in your retirement, and then you probably got to a certain rank and it was, you know, comfortable for you. So why leave? Okay. But then you started to see that no one else was coming in, no one else wanted to take those jobs, and then the trickle down effect starts to happen. You start getting more pressure, you start getting more work. The administrations over the years, Republican or Democrat or whoever, starts putting more things on you to look into. So now these people are overextended and they've reached the retirement age and they're like, I'm out. So now you got to replace almost an entire federal agency across the country.
but they're still working from home.
Which is an interesting part, right?
That's a part that nobody's really talking about. These people are still working from home.
Which
They
makes
have
it,
not gone back to the office yet.
which makes it very interesting if you have to have a conversation with the IRS, because that's already, I don't know if you've ever had to go like have a conversation with them, but sometimes you got to go up there because there's no way to get to the phone line. They give you the correct phone line, then you have to go back, right? And then call, because they won't see you even if they're in the office. You got to make the appointment. So then you have to call the national hotline, wait for hours, 45 minutes to hours, to get back to where your local office may be to make an appointment. And they usually don't do same day appointments. So then you might have to come back and take another day. You know, it's almost like a 2-day thing, or at least a week-long thing, depending on what your situation is. I knew a gentleman who had an issue, and there was no like local revenue area near him. The closest one was in Georgia. He lived in Alabama. So he drove to Georgia to talk to an IRS agent. They made him go wait outside and call the person in the building on the phone. When he finally got there, he got to talk to him on the phone, but had to try to make sure he got all the information together because they told him they weren't going to do a same day appointment. So he had to leave, go back to Alabama, get documentation, come back, and then they asked him for more documentation to where he had to go back to Alabama somewhere else that was not even close to his house. Like it's a burdensome red tape process that I think just needs to be revamped versus just saying we're going to hire more people.
Well, so they said that
Tangent over.
was it 34 billion of the 80 that would be going into the IRS on this is supposed to be used to update the processes and the systems and everything on that line. But can you imagine $34 billion going in to update a system over the next 10 years, but yet you're only allocating for 46 billion to be going towards new personnel over the next 10 years. So it's almost the new systems that are going to be going in. You would imagine that that would be at a much higher rate than what it would
Yeah.
be to hire on new personnel, but obviously not. So I'm curious to find out exactly what these new systems that they're going to be bringing in would are going to do, and how they're going to improve one of the worst administrations next to the VA.
So I really wish, like, look, I'm a big believer in the fact that I think we need to take the United States tax code and just start over. There are clearly like I am all for paying my portion of taxes, because I feel like as an American citizen, that is one of our responsibilities.
I'm not.
Okay.
Taxation's theft.
Here's the thing, like there is certain commonalities that I feel that we all share interest in, and they got to get funded somehow.
Taxation's theft.
The only way to do it is through taxes.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're going to be out here building individual private roads everywhere,
Okay.
individual private highways.
And then you can have have tolls on them, and then you can have
taxation's theft. It's private taxation. That's a taxation.
That is
if,
not
if
taxation.
you're charging
that is
if you were charging
that
me,
is a cost. That is not a tax.
if
Because
you
you
were
can choose
charging
whether or
me,
not to do it.
so why would I pay a toll versus just paying a tax?
Because the taxes, they're coming in, they're taking it out of your pocket with or without
I-
your consent. If you're actually paying for something, you have the option to do it or not.
I do not believe in senseless taxes, but I do believe that taxes are a valuable system.
Of course you do, because they pay your check. They pay your salary.
Maybe.
You have a vested interest in them.
Here's the thing. Taxes have a purpose
I need
and a
a-
need.
I need a new overlay. I'm going to create one that puts like little devil horns with like a bubble over it that says bureaucrat.
Bureaucrat. I like being a bureaucrat to a certain degree. There's a certain level of skepticism that I have there. Anyway,
Trying
back
to
to the
reform from
point.
the inside. I understand.
There is certain shared commonalities like roads that are valuable for all of us to share a common interest in. Certain infrastructure that just needs to be there. Roads, bridges, shared utilities, all that is paid through taxes. Do I believe that every portion of everything should be taxed? No, I don't believe in income tax. I believe there should be a flat tax.
So I will
Flat, fair tax.
I was being very, I want to say extreme earlier in a sense. Obviously, all roads cannot be privatized. I would honestly say that roads, I would agree with you on that. Taxes for that. Interstates, roads, bridges, actual hard infrastructure, and national defense. Those are essentially what the Constitution talks about and
'cause that's what pays
prescribes
for
what
veterans.
it is. But anything outside of that, no. I mean, if you're trying to make a very long stretch, if you're trying to create essentially what is known as the nexus effect, to where you're having to make 7 degrees of separation in order to make the connection there, no, it has no. I should not have to be paying for that.
I will partially agree with you, right? But that is for the citizens to decide. And what I mean by that is each state under its own constitution has the right for its citizens to go up and say that we want to pay an additional tax for this because we believe that this is important to us as a commonwealth.
Well, this is so you're talking about local and state taxes. I'm talking about federal tax.
Same boat.
No, the federal tax is across
Same boat.
you're going to be your income tax is going to be taken out at the same rate regardless of whether or not you want to do that.
What I'm saying is that take something I don't believe in, but other people do.
Mhm.
Okay. Other people believe that we all need to have this carbon tax. If the majority of us do that and vote for it as we should have, or it goes out of the process that it went through, I feel is unfair. Okay, but that's a whole nother boat.
Well,
I
would disagree.
That is in our right for where the majority of the people said this is important to us. We feel that it's important for everyone to be taxed, whether we disagree or agree on the purpose or not. We have to go back to the rule of law, and that is what the rule of law in America says.
I would disagree that it was done. Look, unfairly or anything along that. It went through the process of what
It
it
went through the
did.
process. Yeah.
It followed the rules. It's just that now we are starting to see Americans are waking up and realizing the stupidity that they had, or the level of stupidity they had in 2020 for the election or
To
the
allow
votes
for
they
this to
made.
happen. Yeah, I
Exactly.
agree.
So
I agree with
they're
that
starting
part.
to come back and realize some of the mistakes they made, and some of the legislators they sent up to DC. So here in 87 days, yeah, we'll have an opportunity to rectify that mistake.
Yeah. And hopefully the American people will decide to go with a party that will look out for our best interests. Look, I completely agree that there is a certain level of environmental protection that should be, looked at. Okay. But I also do believe that, the planet goes through a life cycle just like the rest of us. The polar ice caps have not always been there. So at some point they're going to have to melt anyway. And, we can take through history where the earth has gone through periods where it was hotter than it has been right now. All right.
All right,
Now,
so I've got to do this real fast because that right there, I ran across this just the other day, and you're going to love this as much as I did. So the Earth actually broke the record for the shortest day this
Saw that.
year since the atomic clocks were invented. The year prior to that, the same thing, it broke the record. So the Earth is actually spinning up as it's spinning. And granted, it's at a minuscule fraction of a second, but the thing about it is it's spinning up. What kind of effect is that having on our environment? They're trying to say that it's
correct.
because our ice caps are melting, or because global warming is taking effect and really energizing everything. The thing about it is they went back to the what was it, the creation, or the one of the prehistoric periods. I forgot exactly which one it was, but the length of the day was 23 hours, or 23 and a half hours, as opposed to 24, and or give or take a couple of seconds there. So we're, I mean,
That's what I say. When you
yes.
when you go back and you look at, take into account the entire picture. No,
Mhm.
this is. Let me be clear. We are not moving towards an ideal climate for humanity. Getting hotter is not okay for all of us.
Depends on your depends on your nature.
I'm just saying, yeah, but whatever.
I'm very warm blooded.
I'm fine with it being hot. I really don't like it being cold, and the winters are what scare me. Okay.
Well,
So
when it snows, I migrate south.
so my whole thing is yes, that is scary, but the earth has been here for millions of years, and when you track that, since we're talking about science, you can see that there are periods where this has happened, and we've gone through other planetary changes that have caused similar effects. So I digress a lot, but to get back on topic, the way they're going about it, I just have a problem with. It's more of a ram our opinion down your throat versus having a conversation, because I think that both sides are willing to have this conversation, but we just have different opinions on how we got here and how to get to the next step.
Yeah, I disagree. I'm not willing to have the conversation because they're just dumb,
See,
and I don't want to talk about it to
you're
them.
just like them.
Yeah, but I'm right.
See, and they're left. So,
Well, when I say right, I mean I am correct.
I knew what you meant.
Just to clarify, I am correct in every sense of it. Anything that comes out of my mouth is essentially a decree of absolute truthfulness. So.
Oh God, do you hear the head swelling? I'm about to get hit in the head with it. Next topic before I get knocked out by Justin's swelled head over here.
Obviously, this week must be opposite week with everything that we're seeing that's going on across the country. I mean, the notions are just the things that we're seeing, not just in, I guess I would say, in the legal world, but in the political world and the financial world. Everything that we're seeing going on in every aspect of everyday life, we're seeing the opposite of what it was, say, 2 years ago, 2020.
People are getting real bold, and what I mean by that is like there used to be, like, I feel like there used to be a line, like an unknown, undescribed line, to where it was like, okay, like, as a professional courtesy, I know that you may be like, I know your kid may be a crackhead, but you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to expose it because or whatever else is crazy. But we've reached a point now to where like those are like having ripple effects, because you're like, once you take the onion, like the layers of the onion off, you're like, this is outrageous.
Well, he's not just a crackhead. I mean, he is evading on tax, not paying his taxes. He is a national security liability. He is working with a devout American enemy as a financial partner. He is essentially working against every American interest outside of himself and the big guys, and his wife that used to be his sister.
Which is
That's an entire another story there. Which I'm going to.
which is documented,
I'm
which is
throwing that
kind of
one back
like,
up there. That has to be. I mean, that's just too.
which is like,
Really?
yeah, I mean, that's wild. I've seen some crazy things in my life, and you know,
Just think that's getting ready to go on the aircraft that is noted of being or as transporting the leader of the free world, and you have that
so
walking onto it.
I understand emotional damage, and I understand, I'm gonna get real kind of mid right here, as like middle of the road, right? I understand emotional damage, and I understand that sometimes when death comes and emotions are high, people make mistakes, but marrying your blood brother's wife, like there used to be a rule about it, like, you know what I mean, like this is also in the Bible, to where it was like, you know what I mean, like if they didn't have any children, don't let her be widowed, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not the exact quote, but it's in there, you know. But like actually married, having children,
Well, they were also
then
polygamous
remarrying,
at that point in time. What you're talking about,
I don't want to get into all that with them, because this, you know,
and leaving your
The world's
current
wild.
wife that you already have kids with.
the world's wild.
Well, and going back
That's deep
into it,
state stuff.
yes, very. But so that was happening on Air Force One as this was happening on the ground in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Apparently, somebody within Trump's employment down in Mar-a-Lago, and this is what I'm hearing through a lot of different places and things, had essentially tipped off the FBI and told them that there may be some documentation there that he had not been very forthcoming on. I mean, this is stuff that you're
I really
hearing
like. Here's my thing.
on every everyday news show, so it's not really anything that's secretive or anything along that nature. But I mean, they're even talking about. I believe somebody, maybe the Wall Street Journal was talking about how it was possibly nuke codes.
Like, so here's my thing, right? And to tie slightly back into our first topic, um, some of the listings for the IRS job posting, right, was for 2,000 people out of the 87 to be basically almost like post certified to come in and be like a carrying agent.
But
So
that's something we're going to get to in a little bit.
yeah, but here's my whole thing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what happened right before we like dabble into that. Why isn't the IRS just like sending the FBI and they just do the paperwork, and the IRS be the one to? I'm running back to the first topic for a second. Why isn't the IRS like just saying, hey, we found this information, turn it over to the FBI. FBI takes that information, goes to DOJ, just like anything else, versus having their own agency that still won't be able to prosecute, still has to take that information, go there. Like the growth of that level of bureaucracy is horrendous. Okay.
Well, that's because if they did that, then they couldn't go in and execute Americans.
And you said that. Anyway, that also goes to my next point into this. This is the first time that I want to know what it was that they were looking for.
Well,
because this is the first time that like he's not the only president, and everyone has heard this from multiple news sources. He's not the only president who they've said has, you know, accidentally taken a record, or I mean, the Clintons took $28,000 worth of furniture and loaded it up in a U-Haul and took it, and they were like, no, you gotta give it back, even though it was originally gifted to you. You got to give it back because it's property of the White House and property of the United States. So what was it? Was it like the actual file that the aliens that came? Like, what is it? Like, it's got to be something like earth shattering. At least it better be, because you just set a precedent of having the feds running a former president's house.
Yes. So let's see
What'd you
here.
find?
So they released the search warrant now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's see here. All right, where's it at? What they are looking for. The premises to be searched at Mar-a-Lago is further described as blah, blah, blah. Okay. The locations to be researched include the 45 office, quote unquote, the 45 office, all storage rooms, and all other rooms or areas within the premises used or available to be used by the former POTUS and his staff, and in which these boxes or documents could be stored, including all structures or buildings on the estate. It does not include areas in currently, i.e., at the time of the search, being occupied, rented, or used by third parties such as Mar-a-Lago members, and not otherwise used or available to be used by floaters and staff, such as private guests and suites. So they were looking for any physical documents with classification markings, along with any containers, boxes, including any other contents in which such documents are located, as well as any other containers, boxes that are collectively stored, blah, blah, information, including communications in any form regarding the retrieval, storage, and or transmission of national defense information or classified materials, any government and or presidential records created between January of when he was inaugurated and when he left, and any evidence of knowing alterations, destructions, or concealment of any government and or presidential records,
Wow.
or of any documents with classification markings.
So that's basically like a very specific broad. It's
There
like
is nothing specific about that.
What I mean,
all.
like what I mean by that is they're not going in there looking for furniture. They're going in there. They're going in there and not just looking for emails and memos. They're going in there looking for something that's stamped classified, and it can be anything.
So they have boxes that apparently some of these boxes that had been packed up and labeled by GSA when he was leaving. So all of these boxes, Trump did not pack all this stuff up and take it up himself. GSA, Government Services Agency, actually packed all this stuff and sent it down to Mar-a-Lago. He had nothing to do with any of this. GSA was the one that did this.
See, that's the thing that blows my mind, right?
So some of these boxes are labels like A14 through A34, and then you have some of the conversations. So the executive grant of clemency for Roger Stone. You're talking about information with the president of France, just different things along that nature. There is nothing in here whatsoever that would have justified raiding a former president's, or in all honesty, raiding anyone's home of any stature.
Well, so like here, I 100% agree with that, and that I don't believe in just random searches anyway. But I know a few people who have always told me, like, once you reach a certain level of status, like, you don't pack your own bag anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I fly economy, so like packing my bag is all I know. But like, there are certain people who are like, I don't pack my own bag, I don't put my own stuff together. So I don't think Trump has ever like put his own stuff in his own suitcase before. Like, he just doesn't strike me as that type of person. So even with that, like, there's an agency that probably packs up your stuff. So somebody probably packed all this up and was like, here you go. And I don't know. That's just like wild. Because that means like basically an agency kind of packed it up. He wouldn't know. Yeah, like he wouldn't know.
So part of the federal statute, the Presidential Records Act, it says that if you are caught with or not transmitting some of this stuff over there, you can potentially be barred from from holding any future office.
Oh, I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
Well, I mean, it's not a rabbit hole at all. It's a blatant and outright just crying, screaming, "Holy!
No,
here I am."
Well, what I'm saying is the more and more we talk about this, the more I'm like, that's a setup.
Oh, it's
because
this is unquestionably
you're saying
set up.
you're saying that somebody else packed all his stuff up and
Mhm.
moved him out of the White House, took it to one location,
Took it to his home in Florida.
and he probably like hasn't even been there to unpack everything.
Well, so his
What I mean by
entire
that is-
staff has essentially been responding to subpoenas and requests by the Department of Records and with the FBI. Trump's actually apparently has popped his head inside the room to say, "Hey guys, if there's anything you need whatsoever, just let our guys know you have complete and unfettered access to everything."
Well, like it takes me a week to unpack one suitcase when I go on a trip for 3 days. You know what I mean? So like I can imagine like moving. It took me 2 years when I moved, you know, like to unpack like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine what that would be like, especially you wouldn't have any idea what was in there, especially somebody else packed all your stuff. You haven't any idea.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be unpacking any of it yourself.
You wouldn't be
It would
unpacking
just-
anyway.
It would be, yeah, it would essentially be
You
your
wouldn't
staff
pack
and the
it.
people that you hired
You
to
wouldn't
do
have
it.
unpacked it. You wouldn't know what was all carried out.
Mhm.
And then the same people who were there who packed your stuff might be the ones who are saying, "Hey, he has some stuff that he shouldn't have." Like that's just super sketch to me.
I would be curious to see whether or not anybody within Mar-a-Lago or with the access to Mar-a-Lago gets promotions within the federal administrations, particularly the FBI, Secret Service, things along that nature, because that's essentially who were there was his inner circle within his campaign and his
That's
former
wild.
presidential office and the Secret Service detail.
That's wild. That's really wild.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's crazy to think that that's what that's one of the things that he's now having to deal with, and that we're having to deal with it as Americans. The fact that the the FBI, we'll just call them what they are, the three-letter agencies are now emboldened and blazing enough to where they're coming out and they're coming after anybody with any sort of an counter political ideology or a belief.
See, I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll continue to say it. This is why I do not. This is also an argument for those who believe in term limits, but this is why I do not believe in term limits. I do not believe in term limits. I believe in making sure that we continue to try to elect the best person that we can to get up there to represent our values, right? But like term limits only increase the power that bureaucracy has, because this is what happens when, I mean,
Heavy disagreement with that.
like, think about it, because the bureaucracy is bigger than just the three-letter agencies. It's the staff
Yes,
that are
absolutely.
there. The
Mhm.
staff is just going to continue to move around, and they go to different offices. You give the staff continues to increase in power regardless of whoever the representative is.
Unless you appoint the right heads of these agencies that essentially come in, clean house, and hire back in the right people that need to be in these positions.
Yeah, but it don't work that way. That's the thing. The bureaucracy continues.
We
to grow.
don't work it that way, but that it can be done.
It can
that
be
way.
worked that way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. That increases a lot of heavy turnover. When you have turnover, that also is a problem because it fills a void and the lack of information. But I mean, I don't know.
But should our government be so complicated that an average everyday person can't come in and work and do the exact same job as
depending on the
anybody
job,
else?
I do believe that there is a certain level of training that should, and years of experience that should go with a certain position and ranking, right?
So
like
that
you can move up the ladder to a certain point,
Mhm.
and like you can be a genius. You know what I mean? You can be absolutely brilliant. I think
But at that time, you're not just staff. You're likely in a leadership and in an appointed position.
yeah, but there's still a rank that I feel that you should not be able to cross until you have a certain number of years of experience, regardless how smart you are. Because you know there's certain things of when it comes to pressure or
Mhm.
background information or just case history that you may not be able to see all the blind spots, which is, I think this is a blind spot in some of our agencies, to be honest with you, because I don't know, man. It's a blind spot to me because you're starting to see the what happens when you don't know like the totality of it. I just can't imagine that there was someone who knew the risk of and the precedent that they were setting across this country that would, unless there was something legitimate that they're just not disclosing, who would allow for something like this.
Well, that person's absolutely imaginable. It's Merrick Garland. He came out yesterday and took praise for it.
God almighty, man, like that blows my mind, because I just have a hard time. Like, I'm a party person, but there's the
Yes,
rule of law.
we know you
There's
are.
the rule of law. And at some point, you got to like let the parties go and do what is absolutely right. So if this is something that if we come out and this is truly something that's partisan, dude, I'm gonna be honestly heartbroken and devastated for this country more
Well,
than I already am.
it is absolutely, without question, partisan in nature.
I still hold hope that there are people at the top who hold the rule of law and the values of America better than their party at that level to do this.
Well, consider this.
Don't get me wrong. I completely support President Trump, but
what the warrant says was looking for classified documents. The person who has the absolute authority with no oversight whatsoever in classifying or unclassifying documentation is the president.
Yeah, but that gets kind of sketch.
In his possession, he had these documents, and these were packed up before he left that office. So any documentation that could essentially be seen as being packed up would, under the absolute definition of being declassified.
I hear you, but that's the same, that's the opposite side of the hill. You know what I mean? Like, you're going down the same slippery slope that they went when they went to actually go do the search. Now, let me ask you this question: do you think he would have turned over anything classified if
he had?
So what I mean is, like, if he had knowingly had something, do you honestly think he would have turned? Because that's the other side of that's the left's argument right now.
Mm-hmm.
They just were like, we just don't believe that he would have turned it over. But to me, that doesn't even justify sending a whole team of agents in.
Well, they had nothing to base that opinion or that mindset on, simply because he had been forthcoming and had been working with them and had been turning over documents that they had been requesting. He had actually let them come into his. Well, they actually came in and removed 15 boxes. He didn't send them to them. They came to him, and they were the ones that removed it.
Yeah.
So they could have walked out with more that day. It's a setup, plain and simple. But
I just hope and pray that God, I just really hope and pray that this is not where this country is going.
Well, that's unfortunately that's the reason why we have to come out so big in November this year, which is another reason why we'll always remind you to make sure that you like and share any of our content to be able to get it out in front of more and more people, so where you're able to grow the space out more and get this information out more. Also, make sure you subscribe to any of our content there, and make sure you go to our website at conservativestalk.org and hit those sponsor tabs on our site there and help us out with what you're able to, so we can help grow and spread this out a little bit.
Yeah,
more.
Because we got to get back to the rule of law, man.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump right back into it. Let's talk about what Stacey was getting out and about, and what she was pushing.
Makes me heartbroken.
Pushing this week as well. So Stacey and her economic proposal had come out and said that she wholeheartedly supports the idea and will work towards legalizing all forms of gambling in the state of Georgia. And she wants to do this in an effort to increase the level of access to Hope Scholarship to not just students who have worked their tails off in order to maintain a good GPA to have access to this, but to allow the folks that just ride the current to actually have access to this, and to then come back in and go to our higher education institutions here in the state of Georgia and run off on this on these publicly subsidized scholarships.
Look, I agree with part of this. I wish it came from somebody else. I really do agree with part of this. I don't agree with the fact that, here's the thing. I was a C student. I lost my Hope Scholarship, and I lost my Hope Scholarship because I didn't pay attention to my books as much as I should. And that's just the reality of it. people who go out there and get all A's and B's, they're busting their tail. And I believe that as a community, that's our offer to you to continue to strive, because you really can't get out there and work a full-time job to make a good bit of money if you're actually going to be in there studying and going to school. So the least we can do as a community is to help in that regard. Okay. A lot of times it's not that a C student is a lazy student or not that. It's just that they have other responsibilities or other things that they have to do. So they aren't as focused in their books. And I think that that's just not something that can be there. So though I don't agree with the increase of the Hope Scholarship, I do believe that there are certain forms of gambling that we just need to go ahead and open up in the state of Georgia. Hands down.
Okay. Such as?
Oh, we need a casino.
Oh man, Jamie's trying to turn Rome, Georgia into Little
I don't want it
Nevada.
in Rome. I don't want it in Rome. I think there's a casino that needs to go down to the Atlanta Speedway.
Okay.
And other areas. Like you could put one down there and you could put one near, somewhere in North Georgia. But I think that is a level of revenue that we could see that is already leaving the state of Georgia.
Okay. And I can see that. But on the opposite side of that, and I'm let me go back.
What am I good with gambling on?
I understand the aspect of this can bring in additional state funding and money and all this other stuff. But at the same time, looking at all the other things that it can also bring in, and then the cost of that, or the cost that could be associated and coming against the state, and that the state would then have to come back and fix and to apply to correct. You're looking at a law, so we would actually have to increase our law enforcement funding, because gambling brings in
anyway.
Agreed, but up to a certain point, we shouldn't have to come in and throw in hundreds of millions of dollars, because we need to bring in tens of thousands of. We shouldn't be bringing in 86,000 new officers just because we brought in a casino into downtown Atlanta or into Macon or into Savannah. And now we're seeing a rise in organized crime, and we're seeing prostitution being run through the roof. We're seeing human trafficking that's going way off the scales. We're seeing drug addiction. We're seeing all of these rising issues that would associate, or that would ultimately leave us and having to pay more money than what we would be bringing in through gambling.
Hey, it's the 20s, but it's not the 1920s, brother. That's it. We don't have to go that far.
So Atlanta's not already the hub of human trafficking.
Atlanta already is the hub of human trafficking, and we're doing a very good job to try to stop that. What I am saying though is that look at these well-ran casinos across the country so far. Okay, just because there's a certain level of gambling that goes on there, we don't have to be that. Just look at every other thing that we are starting to look at, CBD, things of that nature that are going through the state of Georgia, to where we have actually created a process that does not drastically change the culture of the state like it did Colorado, California, all of them. Colorado's even like Denver's like you can get magic mushrooms now at a decriminalized rate. Like that's next level. Georgia will never get there, not in our lifetime. But I think, and I truly believe, that things like sports betting, horse racing, like to a certain degree, betting on drag races.
Senator, you're riding their coattails on.
No, I just that's just my opinion. Like, like regardless of whoever's pushing it, that was my opinion beforehand. Because the reality of the whole spectrum is that this is something that can come in and revitalize other communities that may not be able to be impacted or may not see certain developments that the rest of the state is seeing. I'm talking about changing generations.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying, and I'm going to take a larger scale model of where you would be going, because you were talking about bringing in casinos earlier.
Yeah.
So let's look at Vegas for an example. Vegas has a very vibrant downtown, illustrious, very the downtown area is gorgeous. It's stunning. There are tons of economic opportunities as far as folks going in and making money hand over fist. But once you leave that immediate downtown area, it's like slumlords all over the place. that's essentially what we would be bringing in to Atlanta if we were to open some of these
If
areas
we
up
did
like
it
that.
wrong. And here's
Well,
what I mean.
what would the difference be?
Here's what I mean. And this is going to be very shocking to everyone. I do not gamble. I do not play the lottery. I do not go to the casino. Even when, there are times when my close groups of friends go and I choose not to go with them because it's not what. Here's the thing.
I like my money too much.
Though I don't want to participate because of my own personal beliefs and needs, I do feel that it is something that is not, as taboo as everyone wants to like make it out to be. Look at what, and though the process is still going on, okay, and not only COVID, but the period that happened to where we are now decreasing law enforcement and everything in Atlanta. The idea behind what happened when we built the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is the same idea that we could look at in the model for a casino. You build a center attraction that brings in new jobs, new wealth, and then you look at revitalizing the area around it. That is something that can change impoverished areas. Areas that used to once be hubs for the state of Georgia, who now have been isolated.
And I see that. I see that idea, and I understand that. I guess that mindset, but if what was it? If I had a penny for every wish that I had out there that had come true, I wouldn't be doing
That's
this
like,
right
see,
now.
here's my problem, right? Because I feel like that's the old man in you. You know what I mean? Because like every time
The
I
realist?
hear, no, not the realist, the old man. Because every time I hear someone say, "Oh, think of the riffraff that casinos are going to bring," I think of the same person who's going to tell me, "Well, I don't want apartments because they bring trouble."
Well, it's
Right?
it's not just the riffraff.
Well, here's what I'm saying though, right? Apartments that were built in the 80s, when they built apartments like that, that's not the same style of apartments that are built today. So when they built Vegas, when they built casinos of that magnitude, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about like mile square blocks that never sleep, the lights never go out. We're talking about something, I guess you could say in a little bit more dynamic terms, like Cherokee in North Carolina, to where it's still somewhat of an area that can be family friendly, and then you can build around it other infrastructure and other attractions that are more relatable to the family, and that's how you keep Georgia beautiful while still bringing something like that in.
I am so glad that you brought up the notion of Cherokee in North Carolina, because you could not have a better example of what a socialist run land area or a mindset of what would essentially be an Indian owned casino, because just the pure redistribution of wealth that is involved with that, or the idea of what is supposed to be the redistribution of wealth, is just, I mean, that's what it is. Exactly.
Again,
So Jamie's advocating socialism.
no, the state of Georgia has its own way of doing things. And I believe that we could build a model that works, period. You can point to multiple examples of where it's failed, where it was done wrong. But I mean, you can look at other portions of the state of North Carolina, though. I love going to Maggie Valley, that, you question the state sometimes and you're like, are you red? You know what I mean? Like, are you red because of your choices? We will never have that problem.
Well, the left uses the same argument for any sort of again, democratic socialism, because socialism and communism across the board has failed at every turn. But yet they still say, well, if America does it, we'll do it right.
Well, hey, look, we can argue till we're blue in the face because there are multiple things that you can point to that align with it. The reality is this is an industry that I feel that could help continue to grow Georgia. Everyone said that, and honestly, here's going to be the real test, right? I'll put it this way. When we get to November, as long as everything that we hope and know holds true, then I believe that it's going to be the same situation when we started producing movies here in the state of Georgia. Everyone's going to say, you're going to California, Georgia, we're going to go blue, and look at what's happened. We still, through the start of that process, for the majority of that process, we still have a Republican-controlled assembly. We still have a Republican-controlled Senate. We still have a Republican governor. So go ahead. That process
So
started long before 4 years ago.
yes, and you're right. You're right. That process did
That-
start long before 4 years ago. But you're seeing an incremental decrease in the red uh, stronghold of what Georgia.
But
used
that
to
was
be.
going to happen anyway. That had nothing to do. That was going to happen anyway.
Mm,
It's going to happen anyway because you just look at the growth of the state. There's always, when we have always talked about the red wall, we talk about the bandwidth outside of the metro area.
yes,
And for the last 20 years, everyone's been talking about what the population of Atlanta itself have to be in order to statistically be more than the rest of the entire state.
in which it is encroaching on every single moment.
Even then, we have still been able to maintain it 20 years later.
Well, the
20 years later.
population density hasn't reached that reached the
Yes, it
level
has.
yet. No, it hasn't. No, not yet. Mm-mm. Nope. Because you're not bringing
Yes,
because
it has.
we're not having the influx of folks that we had essentially thought that we were supposed to receive, because we were on track of receiving an additional congressional seat, or at least we thought we were.
That I think that
but
we still
did
should have
not
gotten.
get, but
That I
we
still
did
believe
not
that,
get.
but because we had a failed census, because we allowed for the census to be done
Mhm.
through some bogus pandemic method.
But
I
it
think that
was
we
the
have the
method, the way that it was
population.
done.
I think we have the population.
Mhm.
I think we got duped when we didn't get an additional representative, but I still believe that there are more people who still hold a true conservative value. It may be a moderate one, and it may not be what is normal to Northwest Georgia, but it is a conservative value, and they believe in the same thing that we do.
Well, obviously not the same thing if they don't.
Oh, they do.
No, but moving on. So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier was that every student. So a lot of students that are in school, they don't have the time, the ability, and the effort, or I guess the time and the ability to focus in on school to maintain the academic level that would be necessary to have that Hope Scholarship, to be able to go through and be able to go through school and have that creation there. So should they actually be going to school at that point in time, or should they be focusing in on engaging and expanding life, or essentially life experiences, and gaining experience and knowledge and things that are not necessarily, or that they would not be able to get within that classroom, and having to pay tens of thousands of dollars in some instances to gain some of that knowledge that they're ultimately not even really gaining.
Here's my thing, man. You're gonna gain the knowledge regardless, and you can gain the experience. I have a motto in life, and I honestly took it from a friend of mine who's no longer here, and it's give me some all of it, because, and I think that's the mindset of a lot of people right now, because you can go in and you can fail, you know what I mean, but you tried, and you can continue to try. Yeah, to some people you may be wasting money, but you're showing that you're going to continue to do it at any level. The older you get, the harder it is to do it, because you throw in career, life, family. But at the end of the day, and let's just be honest, we're in a merit world, right? Your bachelor degree only gets you in the door to a certain company and guarantees you that you may make $50,000, right? $50,000 a year. Outside of that, if you're trying to get to six figures, you got to go to the next level, regardless of whatever happens. So you got to get out there and you got to go get a master's degree. You got to make sure that, and while all that's going on, you're working your career and everything else. So I don't think that not having hope, I don't think that not having, I think it's your drive. I think it goes back to the individual, so no, I am that person that she's saying needs hope. I don't need hope. You know what I mean? Scholarship. Like that was funny. Regardless of what you're going through, you're going to keep going. Like, what was it? WGU or whatever. They have the perfect commercial for this, because, when you got to work, think about the nurses who are going out here and working, who just got, their RN and everything else. They're still working full 12-hour shifts in the middle of the night at the hospital, and then waking up, going to school. They're not asking for hope. They're just saying it is what it is. And then if you can't study for test day, you still go out there and take the test because you tried. If you fail, then you know what? Sometimes you got to repeat a course. it's just the facts of life.
Yes, I guess the mindset or the argument that I was gearing more towards is our system of higher education actually more beneficial than, say, for instance, going out and learning a trade, working a job firsthand with your hands and crafting something, things along that nature. So the vast majority, and this goes back to actually something else that we could do in a future episode, being the student loan, the federal student
Absolutely.
loans in that nature. Um, we're seeing folks that are hundreds of $1,000s in debt, and they can't even get a job waitressing tables with the degree that they have. So
That goes back to life choices. But anyway,
true, but so would it be better? And I guess you would say, in some senses, and especially what we're seeing now across the entire country, and the drastic decline of the actual of the not the service but the skilled labor industry.
So first off, what I want to do is I want to separate the two,
Mm-hmm.
because though a lot of people put trade school and college in the same category,
They are
they're
not.
Okay. And I feel that you can climb to the six-figure ladder going to a trade school a lot faster than you can going through the
Without
administrative
question.
route.
Without question.
Here's the problem, okay, is we need, and everyone knows this, but no one's saying it because we can't keep fighting over everything else. We need higher education
The heck
reform.
we can't.
We need higher education reform. It's the same thing that Bill Clinton did in the 90s that gravitated tech schools. We need to really look at colleges, traditional colleges, 4-year schools, and say, what can we do to trim this process that gives us the same level of value? Because it's supposed to be this balancing act, right?
Mhm.
Because really, you go to college on this side to be an administrator and to be a certain level of manager. You go to tech school to learn a trade. Though both are valuable to a company in a certain sense, you're going in two separate paths that are parallel. So what we're starting to have is, and we had this tip top beforehand, you had more administrators than you had trade laborers. And so the demand is higher here, but you can't get it here. And what we have to do is reset the balance.
Well, I would say the balance needs to be offset quite significantly. And
Currently,
I'd say it needs to be offset significantly and maintained at that level, because you don't need just by pure numbers whatsoever. So the aspect, the administrative part of things, you don't need nearly as many of those as you do the skilled laborers.
I disagree.
Well, of course, you're a bureaucrat.
Like, here's the thing. I think that right now we need a lot more skilled laborers than we have.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot more chiefs than we do Indians, but there is value in it. And here's the other thing too. I do believe that someone who shows exemplary leadership skills and management skills, who gone through the trade route, has every right, and their company should work with them on being able to go and get the next level of their education that they may need to really understand it. But the fundamentals in between the two are way different.
So I would actually argue that is probably the ideal and, quite frankly, the ultimate pathway of getting somebody that would be in a much higher position, is getting them from when they've done all the skilled labor, and then they've become that leadership person. They've shown that they know what's going on. They know how to do it. They're good at doing it. And then they still have the additional ability to go to the next level. That's where you see the promotion and the ultimate rise within administration.
Agree,
leadership.
But there's certain,
you see that. So that's the green to gold idea program within the military.
And see, and there's, but just like with the other side, right? Like,
Mhm.
as an administrator, like, I don't know how to weld. I'd have to go to school for that. You know what I mean? But
or just do it enough times where you learn.
Correct, which is still the same thing, right? But what matters is I need something tangible that says you know how to do it, regardless.
Because you bureaucrats have made it that way.
No, it's just because it's just the facts of life. Like, unless you're gonna give everyone like a test of various skills every job interview,
or just make it to where you don't need a licensure for it.
No, that's dangerous.
Well,
That's
yes
dangerous.
and no.
That's how structures get fall in.
Well, I mean, you can make it optional, whether or not you don't have to have that test.
Then what you're gonna
It's
see is a
on-
rise in
well,
then what you're gonna
it's
see is a
on
rise in
the-
insurance cost.
Well, it's
Because-
on the company that gets the contract to
Like,
make
which
sure
is
their guys are trained.
Heck no, because that's dangerous. Well, here's what I mean, right? Because there's certain skills that you're gonna learn that you're just not gonna learn in trade school. This is point blank period. You may get a synopsis and a basics, like an overview of it, like and to a certain degree, that's kind of outside of like the additional, like the actual trade. That's where all schools start anyway. That first 2 years has nothing to do with what you're going for.
Well, it's a generalized base.
It's a generalized base
education.
level of information, and then you go into what you're actually doing. Same thing with an apprenticeship or a journeyman. And so, in both cases, there is something that you're learning that the other aspects of the people who you were with at the start are not learning. And unless you cross train or do something else in the future that you still have to show something tangible for, there's no way of knowing. You can say whatever you want to. There's doctors who have fake Yale degrees, you know what I mean, on their office, and you don't know until someone passes away or something in the middle of surgery that, you know, hey, he's not really a doctor. That's the problem. Buck may be a doctor, but who knows?
Well, Buck definitely is. I've seen his Yale degree and the Harvard. But so let's jump into the next topic that we were talking about, and that is
This guy.
we're going to show you. We are not going to tell you. We are actually going to show you. So just pay attention.
Center of the initial outbreak, WA1, Washington 1, is considered the ancestral model strain. This
No,
center.
I developed the ancestral model. I created it.
That's right. You let it loose.
I was in my kitchen. And
You let it loose. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Gain of function. Here we come.
So you heard it straight from the horse's mouth.
Like,
Fauci created COVID.
here's the thing. Clearly, he was joking, right?
But was he?
But why would you joke like that?
Well, it's
Clearly
almost
he
the
was
same
joking.
lines as a Freudian slip. You're thinking something, and you know that you don't want to be caught in a sort of a lie, so you make it. Oh, you know, I did this, this, and this, and this, and you let things slip out, and you tell things. That way, you have an out to where in the future, when you get hauled in before Congress on a subpoena, and if you don't show up, you get arrested and thrown in jail. Then you can say, "Oh, well, I didn't lie. I said right there that I did it."
Well, I really don't think that's it at all.
Wow.
I don't like the man or some of his decisions that he made, but I don't think that's it at all. I believe that sometimes people go through enough stuff that the only thing you can do about it is just laugh about it. And though I think the joke was in poor taste, and someone at that level should have never made that joke.
So you don't think he created COVID?
No, what? No, it's a virus.
You don't think gain of function research in the China labs and everything is what actually happened to create COVID-19, as opposed to it was released in a wet lab or in a wet market in China?
No, so here's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I
How do you think COVID came about? Curious.
We have multiple centers of disease control across the world. And to a certain level, their job is to experiment with viruses and various different infections. I think that what COVID is, what the coronavirus 19 is one of those situations gotten out of hand. We know for a fact that there is every disease that has ever been tested, known to man, found out that's horrendous inside of a vault locked up somewhere in some facility that in the world. And what happens is when people go in there and they, test it and play with it and see what they can do to find cures or anything else, the mutation happens and you try to contain it inside a facility. And just like every other movie, everything else, it might eventually get out. I think that's what happened.
So
Was it engineered? Yes.
I agree.
Was it intentionally released? No.
Well, maybe. I agree with yes, it was absolutely engineered in the fact that gain of function is essentially is a mindset or it is a pursuant to make a certain virus more contagious or stronger in an effort to be able to create a vaccine or a treatment to combat something that is stronger and more contagious. So it's a mindset that is born out of pure pure goodwill because they're wanting to create something that would be stronger and be better and to do that. But at the same time, it is inherently more dangerous than actually dealing with the virus and the disease that is just at its core
know
less
about that.
contagious and less deadly.
I don't know about that.
No, that's exactly that's
the theory.
no, no, no. That is the legitimate definition of gain of research.
I just don't agree with it.
Biologist.
Yeah, that medic over here. But like, here's my thing.
College degree too.
My y'all are from I've never biology, that science. Y'all are physical science. You know, not my thing. I just think that there's a certain level of the only way to try to get a true vaccine or reduce the rate of something is to try to manipulate the cells of a virus. And that trial and error automatically tells you that some of the errors are going to be a lot worse. And
that's gain of function. That is the
Understood.
definition of gain of function.
Understood.
It's just so when that's taking place, when that's done, you're inherently creating a disease that is far more deadly and dangerous than what the original disease that you were working
Now
with
I
is.
understand what you're saying, which is true, even though the goodwill is there. Now I
Yes.
understand what you're trying to say.
Not that it was created, well,
Out of ill means.
potentially could have happened that way because
My
that
thought-
is how biochemical weapons of warfare
start,
works.
right? And here's the thing: when it was first released, that COVID was out there, I promise you, I was one of the first people who were like, China's bad at us. Okay. The more and more I let go of my conspiracy theory and try to put a realist hat on, if that was the case, then they would have had a vaccine already ready for their people. And that's just my belief in it. I just think it was accidentally released.
Unless it was intended for themselves as well as everyone else.
To population control, why would you risk that?
Because of the
Here's
age, because China as a nation is aging at such a dramatic rate that they are becoming, or that their elderly population is essentially becoming such a massive burden on their economy that it is really weakening them as a nation.
I
And
mean,
this
I get that,
disease
but like,
inherently
here's the thing.
targeted that specific
Here's my whole thing. Okay,
population.
like, if I am just being as basic as I can get, if I am a old man who is running a country, I am the last generation that I'm going to try to affect.
Unless you're so separated from everybody else to the fact that the likelihood of you coming into contact with that
There's no way.
sickness, well,
There's no way
you don't have the same mindset they do.
that would literally mean like you would be in a closed box. I mean, think about it. That's like saying
Not
like
necessarily a closed box.
Xi Jinping and has to maneuver and move the same way that President Biden does.
No, you don't see Xi Jinping speaking in front of average or speaking in
We don't
front
see
of
it, I mean,
citizens
on
of
China
China.
TV. There it is.
I've never seen the man speak
gonna have
in
to-
front
we're gonna
of
have to go to
actual
Chinese-
nationalists.
We're gonna have to get you the China channel.
That just sounded wrong on so many levels. So many levels.
I know how to think about it. CCTV is available on Comcast for those of you who don't know. But
Are you watching this TV on
It's-
TikTok? Is that where you're
no,
getting it from?
I watch it. It comes in my international packages along with South Korea TV and C-SPAN 3 and a few other things like that. My whole point of this is I just don't. The more and more I think about it, I just don't see someone who knows that, like, South Park reference. That is like the SARS episode when speaking of casinos, the Native Americans in the SARS episode of South Park came in and they were going to bulldoze it and they like couldn't get everybody to leave. So they put SARS on a blanket. And then what ended up happening? his son got infected, and he had to go to them people how they got cured to cure from their son. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There is no level of separation to where when something like that is released that you will not be impacted. No way.
Look at the rocket.
It may not be you.
Look
it
at
may-
Little Rocket Man.
It may not be you directly, but it may be someone that you are close with or cared about. Now, are you crazy like Rocket Man to where you're like, oh, I don't care, I love you, but bye, and off someone if that were to happen? Like,
But
that's a whole nother.
his
That's a
entire
whole
family is literally held within a compound. It's like they have no outside
for
connection
the
to everybody.
same reason. It's a totally different situation, right? They have come to a point to where they are so unliked by their people that they can't go anywhere
Well, it's a
unless they are forced to have people out there with all of their military protecting them.
well, it's along the same lines of what you'll
That's
see
not the
with
Chinese
some of the
government.
there's a good portion of the Standing Seven that are seen like that.
I don't have enough knowledge of the rest of it to understand, but I do know that they're like they have a high nationalism. I don't agree with what they believe in, but they have a high nationalist belief amongst their people. You don't get that by not being present or not being to or
Sure you
having
do.
some ability to
You
that.
just kill off everybody that comes against you, or imprison them, like they do.
Yeah, but that's literally like saying, good bit of Russians like Putin. It's not. Just because you're in power doesn't mean that everyone hates you or loves you.
I disagree. I think that's actually the very definition of politics. You're either hated or you're loved.
No, there's a median. I'm gonna teach you the median. There's a median. Those who don't like you usually don't like you because they can't get what they want from you, and those who love you realize that you have principles and values that you stand on, whether you disagree or like them. Which I agree that
there's no
among any
median.
leader, there is a median.
There is no medium. Mediums don't exist. It's a fairy tale. Let's
You
jump
pendulum
into it.
swingers.
Oh,
It stops. It does.
There's no pendulum on
It
this.
does.
It's always just
Oh, I love it. I love it. MAGA people remind me of Ron Paul people.
MAGA. there is no MAGA here. There is only Justin.
It's just the era. I've just related to a time frame in my mind. That's all. It's just a time period.
Mm-hmm. Time period known as Justin.
Yeah, like when I say Ron Paul, I'm really talking about, remember when everybody thought the world was ending because of the Mayan calendar? That was it. That whole 2008 to 2012, that whole thing,
Well, then you go back to Y2K as well.
Oh, yeah, those people were, what I mean? Look,
Granted, I was one of the families that was stocking up
same.
stuff in the basement.
I was in the 6th grade when we fought, like 6th grade, so that's 6-7 years later from Y2K, from when we finally got rid of the water that we barreled from Cave Spring.
Well, it kind of does make you wonder whether or not there were any specific dates on the Georgia Guidestones before it was destroyed, and maybe that was the reason why it was blown up. But that also is something else. So, as always,
Before we go into conspiracy
before we
theory,
move into it,
yeah, before we go into conspiracy theory, Justin wants to talk about the Rosicrucians and the Georgia Guidestones. But anyway, that's a good segue into it.
But yes, make sure that you like and share any of our content that you run across on any of our platforms. Make sure you comment. It helps us get higher in the news feed and reach a much broader audience. Make sure you subscribe to any of our platforms that you see any of our content on. That way that you'll be up to date with everything that we produce and put out there. And make sure that you go to our website, conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner, the lower right-hand corner, and help us out with what you're able to, just so you'll be able to help us be able to produce more and get our message out further and wider. And Buck has something that he would actually like to let everyone know that's coming up for sure now, that especially what we're seeing in this latest
I
an
didn't think he
act
was
to
right on
provide
this.
for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of the Senate Congressional Resolution number 14.
When Buck first told me about this, I could have sworn that this was just going to be another one of those fairy tales. Like, but clearly, look, it's not opposite week. It's kind of like opposite year, right? Because I swear on everything, when someone told me about monkeypox, it was a joke. Similar to the IRS bringing back the revenue man in this regard and giving them weapons, or the fact that they have stocked up 5 million, like
Over
5
5 million
rounds
rounds.
of ammo. See,
Yes.
I for whatever reason I wasn't going to be able to
Over
get that out.
5 million rounds of ammunition, and they have
I said
stockpiled
arrows.
fully automatic weapons as well. Why
I
does
said arrows like it was the 1800s again. But anyway,
I was trying not to draw attention to that.
I had to acknowledge that.
but why are what essentially would be considered pocket protecting Poindexters walking around with fully automatic weapons of war?
Like, they're sitting here saying that we don't need assault weapons as regular citizens, but then they're going to give the IRS, like, you're going to come shoot me for my taxes? What is this? That's the mob. That's mob stuff. You don't want us to be a militia and a mob, but then you make one? Like, I don't understand.
Well, so we can actually look at this in kind of historical context. If you look at the notion of treason, one of the first issues and charges of treason, of actual treason, came out of the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion was fought simply because of the fact that this new burgeoning country that had risen up against the tyrant king because they were being overtaxed felt that the new federal government was taxing them far too much for their whiskey. So they rebelled against it. And they ultimately charged the guy who organized the rebellion of treason. He was later acquitted, but that's essentially where it came from. And we have, as Americans, which I cannot understand or cannot fathom why the federal government has yet to see this. We instinctually, we at a very genetic and DNA platform are so against taxation,
Any of this.
and so against especially overburdensome taxation fundamentally, that we've started wars. We essentially won our own independence against our own an issue of taxation.
And that's why I say, like, that there are certain taxes that I agree with make sense, but something like this, as to where the federal government feels they need to arm the accountants, like, I just don't understand why they can't just sit there and count the money. Like, you know what I mean? Like what's wrong? Like,
So
and then tell us, and like give people an opportunity to pay it if they messed up. Give opportunity to, like, that's another thing that I think is a major problem, right? This whole idea that the IRS will come in, and they've been doing this to people for decades. They will come in and they will say, you know what, you've messed up on your taxes. You owe this buckload of money at one time. You know what I mean? And you gotta be willing to negotiate. You can't just like say,
it's very true.
You know what I mean? Like the person making $40,000 a year over 10 years, and they're getting ready, over 20 years, they're getting ready to retire, and they messed up, and you're going to come up and say, you know, you owe $300,000 for whatever reason, like,
plus the back taxes, fees,
and then the interest on it, and
yeah.
all those penalties, and like, how do you expect that person to legitimately pay you? Be realistic about it. How do you expect that person to legitimately pay you? And millions of Americans, like,
you want to know how they expect you to pay you? By sending in guys that look just like that. Those are actual members of the IRS SWAT team. Literally members of the IRS SWAT team.
Get the out of here, man. Like,
No, that's exactly who they are. Those
What?
are members of the SWAT team that are members or that are from the IRS. The IRS has a SWAT team, special
For
weapons
what?
and tactics.
For what? Why? Because
scare
someone
you.
did paperwork wrong?
To scare you. Because if you don't pay the federal government
Give me
the
death.
money they want, it's essentially
Give me death.
it's almost a hostage situation. If you don't pay, you're going to die. That's what they'll be sending in to kick in the doors, are those guys right there.
What is this world coming
And the
to?
fact that we are now increasing this number by 87,000.
And adding 2,000 more SWAT team members.
Well, so not just that, but so think of it this way: that
Those are
5
just special
million,
agents. Yeah.
that 5 million had been previous years. Just the last year alone, there was over $700,000 worth of ammunition that was purchased, and a vast majority of that ammunition that was purchased were rounds that are essentially banned by the Geneva Convention for use in conventional warfare. But yeah, so that's these are the folks that will be coming in to essentially coming in and kicking in your front door when you don't pay the federal government their skin.
You know what? I've said this before on other episodes. We're going to play the video this time.
Yes.
Because this is what I think of. And it's almost been 20 years now when MTV just put out these random commercials. I have no idea why. It was not a Holocaust anniversary, and I'm not trying to relate any of this to Holocaust, but just play the video.
Yeah. So
Play the video.
these are two videos we're going to play back to back. You know, I see a surprising similarity to some of those figures. What I'm seeing right there.
Which is what has always terrified me, which is why I fully believe in the Second Amendment. Because again, 20 years ago, MTV put those commercials out and they were airing live, and no one knew why. No one knew why. And you're like, almost 20 years ago, 2005, 2006 timeframe, and you're like, what is this? And so then you know, not to like make a conspiracy out of it or correlate the two to a point to where it gets us really in the corner that we're in with conspiracy corner, but this is real.
Yes, that's the scary part about it.
That's the scary part about it, is like, that's relatable. That's what happens when you don't have a weapon inside of your house. That's what happens when they take all means of you to be able to protect yourself and have no idea what's going on. That's what happens when you continue to weaponize agencies. They ain't got no business being weaponized. Like again, I believe that the FBI has a job here. I believe local law enforcement has a job here. I believe that certain agencies do need to be weaponized, and I'm not trying to take away from that at all. What I am saying is for what purpose are we going to send armed people in to get someone's taxes? Call the FBI and have them come with you to do it. File the report just like they have to do later on. Send the FBI agents in if it's that level of a crime. If it's the level of crime that they believe that their tax evasion is so significant that they have to bring armed guards in, call the FBI.
Let somebody who has
Experience
actually come
exactly.
into it as opposed to Poindexter with machine guns.
You see my point? Because this is the same party that's sitting here telling us teachers shouldn't be armed because they don't have the experience. Local people shouldn't be armed because they don't have the experience. Police need more training before they just go out and start shooting people. Yet you're going to give the IRS 500 rounds of ammunition to go in after people, and you don't 5 million, and
700,000 just last year,
and you're going to go and you don't think anything's going to happen
mm-hmm.
unless you want it to,
yeah.
which is even worse.
And about some of the specifics on some of the stuff. So, like I was saying earlier, the majority of the ammunition they purchased is an ammunition that is banned specifically by the Geneva Convention for use in conventional warfare because of the damaging effects that it has on the human body. So what they have purchased are known as Spear LE Gold Dot rounds and ammunition. So it's Spear law enforcement Gold Dot rounds and ammunition. Can't even use that in the military just because of the damaging nature of that specific round. Just how fast it leaves the round, how fast it leaves the barrel, and how destructive it is once it does hit the body.
So let me get this straight. A weapon that the United States took out of war to kill our enemies.
Not just the United States, but the world.
Oh, because you said Geneva. You're right. That the world has taken out, that the IRS bought it. Did they give any disclaimer as to why they purchased this round? That none. They were just like, this is the one we want.
So it is specifically the Spear LE jacketed hollow points. I believe they're 115 grain rounds for 9mm, and that our jacketed hollow points are specifically banned by the Geneva Convention for use in conventional warfare.
But the IRS,
has it to raid Americans and kill them with fully automatic weapons that the IRS needs, the accountants of the federal government need
to go get the money.
Accountants need fully automatic weapons now.
Holy cow! You know, they say history repeats itself, but I feel like we are gearing up for what was called the FDR gold take. Yeah, I mean, because we've reached the point now to where a lot of Americans don't even know that we got through the roaring 20s, but that's how we supposedly got out, is because our grandparents, great-great-grandparents either died with their gold, buried their gold, and got away, or they had to turn it into the federal government to restart Fort Knox.
And they were given essentially a promissory note of, you have this much money.
So, and some people don't realize this either. So quick, very quick lesson or thought. You can all go look this up. But when we were truly backed by precious metals, this is what collectors of currency like me, I know, gone. Collectors like me have red seal dollars, blue seal dollars, right? Because those are actually backed by the precious metal. So when everyone was forced to turn in their precious metal, this is when the green seal. So if you look at a bill, it's go grab just a random $1 and you see the green seal around it. That is only to show that this is just, that's when the whole term of, this is for all means of debt, right? That green seal did not used to be green. It used to be blue or red. And if you got money from North Africa during a certain time period, it was gold. But each seal represents a different time period for a different reason, for a different method of backing that currency during that time. And when everyone in America was forced to turn in their gold, this is how we got to the way that we have money on faith and bonds, pretty much.
A fiat currency.
Fractional banking.
Well, we're all just running and heading to hell in a handbasket. Although we do still have hope. There's a slim glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, and it gets lighter and lighter, especially when you make sure that you like and subscribe to our show
and vote for good politicians
and help us to spread the message and get our message further out there, and making sure that you subscribe to our platform so where you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. And make sure that you go to our website, and we'll put that back on the screen there at conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner, the lower right-hand corner, and make sure you also sign up with your email so you can stay up to date with everything we have going on and get kind of an insider look into the the massive project that we have that we're moving forward with.
I like what you did there. Can I do my favorite part now?
Let's do it there.
87 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
What?
And hopefully, this is the beginning of a process to end all of this tyrannical madness before we get to the 2030s, and it looks like the 1930s.
We have to have a line somewhere, and
at some point, everybody has to stand up, man.
Well, that's true. I mean, we've got to grow a backbone, and you're going to need a backbone when you enter into the 50-50 competition that we have
Yeah,
that
we're
we have
gonna
come
do.
forward with.
We got to come out with that
So
pretty soon.
yeah, so make sure you sign up with your email so you can stay up to date on that and make sure that you are in the running to win some money. But as always, this is Justin,
And I'm Jamie.
and you've been inside our minds.